72 hours. That's the window Atlanta had to prepare, and somehow the city still wasn't ready for what Cardi B dropped inside State Farm Arena on night one of the Little Miss Drama Tour. This wasn't a concert. This wasn't a tour stop. This wasn't even a performance in the traditional boxed-in sense of the word. What unfolded Friday night in the heart of the A was a full-blown cultural quake, the kind that doesn't just rearrange the hip-hop landscape. It sets the old map on fire and hands everybody a brand new compass. And if you weren't breathing the same oxygen as those 20,000 bodies packed shoulder to shoulder inside that arena, I'm going to walk you through every last detail, because what really went down has barely been captured on social media yet. And there are layers to this night that nobody's talking about. Layers that quietly flipped the entire conversation about where Cardi stands in 2026. Roll it back to hours before the doors cracked open, because Atlanta didn't wait for the show to begin. Atlanta hijacked the sidewalk and turned it into an opening act. The streets orbiting State Farm Arena didn't just fill up, they ruptured. By sunrise, fans were already forming caravans around the block, and by early afternoon, that line had mutated into something closer to a street parade than a queue. I'm not being dramatic when I say it felt like a pilgrimage. Custom Little Miss drama outfits stitched from scratch, rhinestone cowboy hats catching the daylight like tiny chandeliers, sheer cutouts pulled straight from Cardi's onstage wardrobe and translated into everyday street theater. Every single person out there stepped out of the house with something to prove, because in Atlanta, you don't simply attend, you arrive, you announce, you declare. And right here is where the whole thing started shifting from event to phenomenon. The conversations in line weren't small talk, they weren't weather chatter. Fans were quoting Cardi like scripture. One circle of girls kept chanting, "A bag never gets cold," while fanning out in fits that literally proved the bar. Another fan, calm, locked in, eyes straight ahead, told a reporter, "I'm my own competition. I'm competing with myself." And the girls around her nodded like she just dropped the new gospel of the Bronx. Then came the moment that tattooed itself into the night's memory. A single fan lifted a handmade sign reading, "I'm the Hood Mona Lisa," and within seconds that phrase detonated across the line. One voice, then 5, then 50, then the whole block was chanting it back like it was a hymn. That wasn't fandom, that was identity transfer. That was the gang moving as one organism, and it hadn't even gotten dark yet. Strip this moment to the bone and examine what's actually underneath. Atlanta wasn't preparing to consume a performance. Atlanta was assembling a congregation. And by the time the sun started to tuck itself behind the skyline, that carnival energy began tightening into something heavier, an anticipation so thick you could practically chew it. The doors finally crack, the crowd rushed the gates, seats filled in waves, and the arena lights dimmed down just enough to let 20,000 people feel the tension climbing up their spines. Then came the pause. That one surgical second of near silence right before everything snaps. The bass cratered into the floor, the lights cut dead black, the screens ignited, and rising above the entire arena, not walking, not running, but floating, was Cardi B suspended on a massive platform that looked like something pulled out of a sci-fi opera. That wasn't an entrance, that was a mission statement. She slid straight into the intro, threaded it into hello, and from that first syllable, you already knew the rulebook had been shredded. Her energy wasn't warming up, it was already at detonation velocity. Every bar crisp, every move sharpened to a razor edge, every transition locked down with the kind of precision you only get from an artist who has been training in silence for months. And the most ridiculous part of it all, she did not slow down, not once, not a breath, not a blink. She cycled through 6 custom looks across the night, and each one raised the bar so high the next fit had to kick the door off the hinges. But there was one piece, a red and black sheer construction that moved like it was alive, that turned the entire front section into a phone forest. Screams, overlapping screams, cameras shaking from the laughter and the disbelief. And in that exact heartbeat, you weren't watching a rapper, you were watching command. Now this is where the night flipped gears and entered a completely different dimension, because just when it felt like the ceiling had already been shattered, Cardi pulled a move that recalibrated the entire atmosphere. The stage went hush. The lights softened into the cinematic, almost candlelit glow. The energy dropped maybe 15% and the entire arena leaned forward without anybody telling them to. That's when she stepped back into the spotlight wearing a piece built specifically for Atlanta. Not a recycled outfit, not a remix, a one-of-one sculptural metallic gown, handcrafted for the single night, catching every strobe, every laser, every flash, like the fabric had its own nervous system. From one angle, it looked like liquid mercury. From another, it looked like armor forged out of moonlight. And from every angle, it told a different chapter of the same story. She eased into the smooth, melodic pulse of Please Me, and the entire room rearranged its posture. Phones lifted in unison, voices softened into this reverent hum. The dress moved like it was being stirred. Then, without warning, the beat for I Like It detonated like a grenade in a cathedral, and everything flipped inside out. The stage erupted into color, tropical lights sprayed across the arena like a carnival exploding from inside a spaceship. Cardi flipped her gear from seductive to savage in the space of a single breath. Her movement cut sharper, her presence expanded outward, and that metallic fit, now hitting new rhythms under fresh lighting, mutated into a peacock-inspired spectacle that felt less like fashion and more like cinema. The kind of visual that doesn't just go viral. It becomes the reference other artists have to answer to. Then came the moment, the one every city on this tour has been gunning for, the one that separates a rowdy crowd from a legendary one, the Pretty and Petty Mute Challenge. Cities like Boston and Connecticut had already planted their flags in the ground, but Atlanta strolled up to the mic like it had something personal to prove. The track played, the crowd was deafening, uncontrollable, almost animal. Then, mid-bar, the music cut. Cardi froze mid-pose, scanned the arena, waiting, listening, daring the room to fail her. And inside 2 seconds, 20,000 people went silent. Not almost silent, not mostly silent, completely, eerily, surgically silent. The kind of silence that rings louder than any drum drop, because it's the sound of mass discipline, the sound of a city that understands exactly what moment it's inside of. For those few suspended seconds, Atlanta didn't just participate in the challenge. Atlanta owned it. Then boom, the beat slammed back in, the arena cracked open again, and you could literally feel the building flex. And right here is where the story stops being about a show and starts being about an entire city crowning itself. Because Cardi still had cards up her sleeve, and the next one she flipped is the one that's going to live on timelines for the rest of this tour cycle. She paused mid-set, smiled like she knew something the crowd didn't, glanced out into the dark sea of faces, and teased the room with one of those setup lines. Maybe I need somebody to come sing the blues for me. Maybe I need somebody to come sing the blues for you. The arena reacted before the first note even dropped, because Atlanta already knew. That's how tapped in this fan base is. The light shifted into a moody amber. The track changed, and walking out, unbothered, royal, silk in her stride, was Mariah the Scientist. The reaction wasn't a scream. It was a tidal wave, because this wasn't a surprise drop. This was a transmission. Mariah's voice poured into the arena like warm rain, and suddenly the loudest room in Georgia turned into the softest choir on earth. 20,000 people singing every word, couples leaning into each other, girls holding up their partner's phones so they wouldn't drop them, strangers making eye contact like they'd just shared a secret. That's the kind of moment that marketing departments can't manufacture. That's chemistry. That's lineage. That's the whole culture aligning for one breath. But Atlanta's card hadn't even been fully played yet, because just as the room started to exhale, that heavy ATL trap bass crept back in, you know the one, and walking out with that unmistakable swagger wrapped around his shoulders was Jeezy, the snowman himself. The arena didn't just scream, it lost access to language for about 10 solid seconds, because the second Jeezy appears in Atlanta, you're no longer at a concert, you're at a coronation, you're at a history lesson. You're at the intersection of everything the city built from the late 2000s until right now. Every fan in that building who came up in trap music felt that cameo hit somewhere behind the ribs. And then, because Cardi is a surgeon with her guest list, came the finisher. Because when you're in Atlanta, you don't throw a party without paying respect to the throne. On cue, another silhouette walked from the shadow into the spotlight. T.I., the king of the South, the cosign every Atlanta show dreams about but doesn't always get. And when he walked out, that wasn't a cameo, that wasn't a feature. That was a full circle statement, a passing of the crown, a cultural handshake between a Bronx queen taking over arenas and an Atlanta king whose DNA is stitched into every block of the city. At that exact moment, you weren't watching a tour stop, you were watching Atlanta throw a coronation dinner in the middle of its own living room. Pull back every layer and examine the wreckage. What Cardi actually engineered that night was a 3-tiered legacy reveal. Mariah for the emotion, Jeezy for the streets, T.I. for the throne. 3 different eras, 3 different textures, one unified message. Cardi isn't visiting Atlanta. Atlanta is welcoming her home. And the craziest part? There was a whole second show happening in the building that most of the internet still hasn't caught up to yet. Because while the main stage was detonating, the VIP sections had quietly transformed into a red carpet. Scan that room and you caught celebrities tucked into every corner like hidden Easter eggs. Taylor Williams locked in, moving to every beat like she was part of the tour itself. Not too far from her, Stefon Diggs' mom, present, supportive, fully tapped in, which, if you've been tracking the timeline, adds a completely different texture to the night. Because this moment stopped being purely about music a while ago. This is about presence, about showing up in real time when it counts, about the women in Cardi's ecosystem physically planting themselves in the room to say, we see you and we're here. Up in the suites, Atlanta royalty in the flesh, Kandi Burruss, was vibing with her crew, locked into the energy like everybody else. And then came the moment the internet is still replaying on loop. Because if you know about Jason Kelce. Yeah, that Jason Kelce. The man who's basically become an honorary member of the Little Miss Drama Tour. The one who has been spotted at almost every show, who knows every ad-lib, every pause, every hook, every breath. The cameras caught him in the crowd rapping every word of every song, matching Cardi bar for bar like he was on payroll. And he wasn't performing. He wasn't doing it for the camera. He was locked in because he's genuinely a fan. That's the kind of viral fingerprint money can't script. And right as the arena thought the energy had peaked, Cardi slid into the trifecta, Bodak Yellow, WAP, Up, back to back to back, each one engineered to hit harder than the last. The crowd bounced so hard, the upper bowl visibly swayed. But then, in the middle of that chaos, she did the one thing nobody in the building expected. She slowed everything all the way down. The lights dropped to almost nothing, the arena settled, the production quieted, and Cardi, no theatrics, no pyro, just a woman and a microphone, started talking. She talked about the Bronx, about the journey from stripping, to writing, to auditioning, to getting dropped by labels, to clawing her way into this exact building, about selling out city after city on her first proper arena run, about the nights she cried in bathrooms early in her career when she didn't know if any of this would ever happen. Her voice cracked once, just once, and then she landed on the line that hit everybody in the chest at the exact same time. Don't let nobody take your happiness away. 15 words, no production, no beat, no backup dancers, just truth. And Atlanta felt every letter of it. You could see phones dropping, people nodding, strangers hugging each other, girls wiping mascara. That wasn't Cardi the superstar anymore. That was Cardi the human. That was the 30-something mother, the Bronx woman, the survivor, the girl who fought through every door slam and ceiling crack to get inside this arena. That's the moment that separates a show from a memory. Because everybody who was inside State Farm Arena that night didn't just witness a concert. They witnessed a full circle resurrection, a victory lap for someone the industry wrote off a dozen times. A reminder that the Little Miss Drama Tour isn't just about numbers. It's about proof. And the numbers? Let's talk about the numbers for a second. 34 shows on the board, city after city sold out, night after night breaking internal tour records. And somehow, even after all that, the tour still feels like it's getting bigger, louder, more ravenous. That's not a campaign. That's not marketing. That's organic momentum that most pop stars try to build for a decade and never touch. Cardi is doing it in real time, with no visible dip, no off night, no missed beat. But here's the plot twist nobody's talking about yet. Night 1 was only the opening chapter of Atlanta. Night 2 was already scheduled, the bar already sky high, and every fan who missed Night 1 was now operating in full panic mode, trying to scalp tickets for round 2. Because once a city gets wind of what Cardi did on Friday, nobody wants to be the person stuck watching it secondhand. And the domino effect this one night is going to have on the remaining tour stops? Legendary. Every upcoming city is now on notice. Every arena is now getting the blueprint. Every fan base is now officially in competition with Atlanta's Friday night. And strip this whole night down to its raw anatomy, and what you really witnessed was the quiet arrival of a new kind of superstar chapter. Because for a long time, the conversation around Cardi B was about singles, features, Instagram wars, courtroom drama, and viral moments. Friday night was the moment that conversation shifted permanently. Because what she pulled off inside State Farm Arena was the kind of performance that moves you from being a pop culture fixture to being a stadium-grade historical artist. The transition every rapper dreams about. The transition most never make. Think about it like this. Mariah the Scientist gave her soul. Jeezy gave her streets. T.I. gave her the throne. The crowd gave her the 20,000-person silent challenge. The VIPs gave her the celebrity audit stamp. Jason Kelce gave her the cross-cultural endorsement. Candy Burris gave her the ATL home team nod. And the Bronx speech? That gave her the humanity that turns fans into believers. Every single box that an arena-era superstar needs to check, Cardi checked them all in a single night. And she did it without a single slip, without a single missed cue, without a single dead zone in the set list. So now the question isn't whether the Little Miss Drama tour is successful. That conversation is already over. The new question is where this tour ends up being ranked 5 years from now in the timeline of all-time female rap tours. Because what we watched Friday night wasn't just a concert. It was the recalibration of what's possible when preparation, production, vision, and city-specific craftsmanship all align on the same stage. It was a reminder that hip-hop still knows how to throw a stadium-grade spectacle when the right artist takes the mic. And there's one more wrinkle to this entire story that almost nobody is connecting the dots on yet. Because the timing of this Atlanta night, the scale of it, the caliber of the guests, the precision of the production lines up suspiciously well with a larger industry shift that's been quietly rearranging itself behind the scenes. For the last 18 months, female hip-hop has been in a cold war, a silent tension where nobody wanted to throw the first punch, but everybody was loading ammo. Cardi just walked into the middle of that standoff and detonated a mic drop so loud, it changes the pecking order without a single shot fired. She didn't need a diss track. She didn't need a subliminal. She didn't need to tweet. She simply sold out an arena in the most culturally loaded city on the map, invited the royalty of that city onto her stage, got them to bow to her in their own home, and walked off with every receipt. That's not a clapback. That's a checkmate. And right here is where the narrative implodes for anybody who's been underestimating her for the last 3 years. Because the loudest voices in the room kept framing Cardi as a personality first and an artist second. Friday night flipped that equation upside down, set it on fire, and buried the ashes. Because what she demonstrated inside State Farm Arena is something that can't be faked, bought, or botted. The ability to stand in front of 20,000 people, control their breathing patterns, flex multiple genres across a single set, pivot from twerking anthems to emotional vulnerability without losing an ounce of crowd retention, and then hand the mic off to 3 different legends without getting upstaged by any of them. That's not a personality. That's not a brand. That's a full-spectrum arena-grade artist that the industry has to respect whether they like her or not. And if you were in that building, you already know. If you weren't, let this be your wake-up call, because Night 2 is loaded. The remaining tour dates are about to turn into gladiator events, and every fan base across every city is going to be trying to outdo what Atlanta pulled off on Friday. That's the standard now. That's the new ceiling. That's the new cultural scoreboard. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, Cardi's watching the chaos, smiling quietly, and getting ready to do it all over again the next night with even more fire. And before we close the book on this night, let's zoom in on something that almost slipped through the timeline unnoticed: the fashion economy Cardi built around this single tour stop. Because those 6 custom looks weren't just outfits, they were conversation starters engineered to spread. Every single piece had a distinct architectural purpose. The opening floating platform fit was designed to look celestial from a distance, to read as a visual myth before a single lyric landed. The sheer red and black construction was built for the front row camera economy, stitched with the specific intention of dominating every close-up shot that would flood the internet within minutes of the show ending. The metallic Atlanta gown wasn't pulled from a catalog, it was tailored for the city itself, so that when the footage hit TikTok, everybody would know exactly where that fit was born. The peacock-inspired transformation was engineered for the carnival beat drop, a visual punctuation mark so loud it drowned out the snare. Every look was a thesis. Every fabric was a sentence. Every sequin was a syllable. And when you zoom out, you realize Cardi wasn't just performing a concert. She was running a live fashion show inside a rap show, inside a cultural festival, inside a coronation. 4 events layered inside one ticket. And then there's the production itself, which deserves its own breakdown, because most people watching the clips online don't realize the engineering behind what they're seeing. The lighting rigs at State Farm Arena were custom programmed for each of the 6 outfit changes. The stage lifts were choreographed to the exact millisecond of specific bar drops. The pyro was timed not to the chorus, but to the breath she took before the chorus. That's a level of detail that almost nobody in arena-level hip-hop is touching right now. And when you combine that with her vocal stamina, her in-ear monitor discipline, her dance precision, and her crowd-reading instincts, you start to understand that this tour isn't just about Cardi having moments, it's about Cardi proving that she can hold an entire stadium on her shoulders without leaning on anybody. So tell me, if you were there, which moment cracked you open first? Was it the Mariah the Scientist duet that turned the arena into a chapel? Was it Jeezy's trap walkout that sent that building into tremors? Was it T.I. stepping out like the king of the South reclaiming his block? Was it the Bronx speech that shut everybody up at once? Or was it that 20,000-person silent challenge that made history look shockingly quiet for a few seconds? Drop your moment, drop your fit, drop your footage, drop your favorite line, because this conversation has barely started. And if you missed night 1, lock in, because night 2 just became the most anticipated show on the entire tour. Atlanta raised the bar, moved the goalposts, flipped the table, and handed every remaining city on this tour a dare they didn't ask for. Now, every city has to answer, every fan base has to compete, every arena has to deliver, and every doubter has to either sit down quietly or admit out loud that what happened Friday night was undeniable. Stay pretty, stay petty, and stay locked in, because this tour is not slowing down. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not next week, not until the last city on the map kneels in front of that stage, and the entire tour is engraved into the permanent record of arena-era hip-hop history.